You're with Julian on the Brown Notes and Israel and America versus America's students. Columbia University faculty say they're horrified by Tuesday night's arrests of students in New York by New York police following the occupation of the academic building Hamilton Hall by students protesting to divest from Israel. After 9:30 on Tuesday night, NYPD buses parked outside the hall were filled with arrested students. Columbia has chosen to escalate at every turn here with disastrous results. The administration said that the protests were a disruption and presented safety risks, but it's administration itself that's disrupted campus life by locking us out and relocating or postponing student exams. "We're on the right side of history," said one of the students. "Shame our leaders, shame on administrators for allowing the police onto campus. The US is part of this war in Gaza. It's our taxes, our bombs, our F-15s and Apache helicopters being used to kill Palestinians," said Rashid Khalidi, a Palestinian-American historian and professor of modern Arab studies at the university. He said, "What we witnessed last night in terms of police repression is a fraction of what Palestinians have experienced for 56 years. Jennifer Wenzel, a Columbia English professor, said, "When I saw a police tank coming up the street, something in my heart broke. I stood and sobbed." Now, the treatment of American students by Biden, by the administration, and by the media, the infantilizing of them, the lies, and the continual painting of what is a protest against apartheid and genocide as being an anti-Semitic event is disgusting and disgraceful. For a start, the media and the government both routinely ignore the presence of Jewish protesters against Israel in these movements. And they paint things like a pro-Israeli supporter being attacked with someone throwing a rock at them for marching through the grounds of the university waving an Israeli flag. Now, I would suggest if you march through the grounds waving a Russian flag at the moment and a Ukrainian student threw a rock at you, no one would bat an eyelid. But here it's painted as anti-Semitism. It is not. It's the only way that the media, who continually patronize these students as not knowing what they're talking about, being beholden to interests outside. It's the same playbook that they use every time. They're beholden to outside interests. They couldn't possibly come up with these ideas on their own, so they must be branches of Hamas in universities guiding them. God forbid they could just oppose apartheid and genocide. These are the biggest student protests since the Occupy Wall Street movement and all the way back to the Vietnam War movement in the late 1960s, which had an innumerable impact on, or immeasurable impact on the public turning against the Vietnam War. I feel it's going to be the same here, in solidarity with Columbia University and in particularly with the authoritarian crackdown on these students. An unstoppable force has risen in America's universities where more and more of these protests are happening, and they're becoming more and more authoritarian, trying to expel these students, give them, criminal records, trying to scare the living hell out of them, and they're not buckling. They don't care about your shit. They really aren't buckling. They're standing up for what's right and being on the right side of history, and they are, because people in Gaza are painting on their strips, "Thank you, Columbia University." And thank you to American students for what you're doing. And you see people, Biden's actually come out and said he believes in the right to protest, but the infantilizing way that they treat these students as not having the intelligence or the courage of their own convictions and being, managed by outside forces. Even Netanyahu understands how strong this is. As Netanyahu compares US university protests to Nazi Germany, young Palestinians welcome support. As pro-Palestinian protests appeared across university campuses in America, leading to hundreds of arrests, young Palestinians in war-torn Gaza have told CBS News they appreciate the support from America. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, however, has condemned the demonstrations as anti-Semitic and even compared them to rallies in Nazi Germany. Should we have a look at that? So back in World War II, American students did protest against Nazis, again, against fascism. And when you see this pro-Israeli mob turn up wearing face masks and carrying brickbats, beating up students while a phalanx of police looks on, refusing to get involved, it's not the students that are resembling the Nazis or the Nazi supporters. Hundreds of thousands of American students protested the Nazis in the 1930s in American universities, just as they're protesting fascism today. And Netanyahu claiming they're closer to the pro-Nazi rallies in Germany. Actually, it was the right wing of American politics that didn't want America to get involved in the Second World War, who were on the opposite side to the students protesting the Nazis, who were on the same side as Jewish Americans. It was the right wing of American politics that tried to stop America getting involved in World War II, and who was sympathetic to the American Nazi Party. So Netanyahu is talking out of his arse when he says that these students are closer to the people supporting the Nazis in Germany, when they literally are the same people who opposed the Nazis in America in the 1930s, en masse in the same way they're doing now. The hypocrisy and lying of this whole conflict, where they say that, this is not the same as Ukraine, we're supporting freedom fighters in Ukraine, Russia are this terrible demonic force, but everyone knows you're lying. Everyone knows that you're hypocrites, because we know that it's the same thing, and the Eurovision Song Contest is going to find out next week, because no one believes your horseshit lies about this, about how it's different. We know it's not different. We know now what, everyone has said for the last 50 years. What would you have done if the Nazis were on the table now? Or if genocide was being committed? We all know. It's the students that would have protested, and the governments and the right of politics that would have held their hands of the enemy. And it's come down to, partisan views. The right of politics didn't support the protest against the Vietnam War either. There's this great hypocritical lie, which is if you don't support something, you then lie and say it's how they're protesting. And it happens every time. So they'll say, I support their right to protest. I'm not one way or the other on the issue. But then you'll find a reason to oppose every single way they protest. It's a lie. It's a complete fabrication. You oppose their view. You don't oppose the way they're going about it, because you would oppose any other way they went about it as well. They're on the right side of history, and Biden's caught in a trap because his natural support for the Democrats is against what Netanyahu's racist government is doing in the Gaza Strip. And he's having to defend somebody who he personally finds appalling. And on the other side, you've got the Republican Party under Trump, who actually support what the Netanyahu's government is doing. He's got no friends in supporting Netanyahu, a man that obviously can't stand him. Even if this has spread, even in France. Jack, 22, a student in a public administration, was dragged out of his university building by the arms and legs on Friday, just gone, as police forcibly removed several dozen students who've been occupying Paris Sciences PO University overnight in protest against civilian deaths in Gaza. We'll keep going, said the French-American student in his final year. This is about speaking out against genocide. It's an international movement. We occupied the building peacefully. As an aside, hearing the Republicans under Trump, who welcomed and championed the Nazis in Charlottesville, chanting anti-Jewish slogans, saying that they're friends of Jews and that everyone else is anti-Semitic. They literally supported people chanting anti-Jewish slogans. Science POs become a focal point in French student protests over the war in Gaza and academic ties with Israel. The protests, much smaller in scale than in the US at the moment, have spread to other universities in recent days. I simply don't want my government to be complicit in this genocide. About 10 Sciences PO students began a hunger strike in protest in France. We're infantilized or demonized. That's exactly what's happening in America. Infantilized or demonized. This isn't going away. This is a flashpoint. And quite honestly, when you've got a social, political, economic paradigm where the opportunities once people leave universities are no longer to have great jobs and great homes, you're playing with fire here. This isn't going to go away. And this is an election year. And Biden really needs to understand what an impact this is going to have on his core vote. Obviously, no one's going to go and vote for the unrelentingly, under any circumstances, up to and including genocide, pro-Republican Party voter who will support Netanyahu anyway. And a lot of them are evangelical Christians who believe that the end of times in Israel is part of this process. So have a biblical connection with the events going on, quite terrifyingly. But we're so bad in the West at blocking people and trying to stop them without addressing what they're actually standing for. Check this guy out. The Ghassan Abu Sitta, a surgeon who described the described the events in Gaza as a massacre. He's just a London surgeon. He's not accused of being pro any Hamas groups or connected with anything. Just that he's a prominent surgeon in the UK who described the events in Gaza as a massacre, has been denied entry to France, where he was due to speak in the French Senate on Saturday. Arriving at Charles de Gaulle Airport on Saturday morning, Professor Ghassan Abu Sitta, a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, was informed by French authorities that Germany had enforced a ban on his entry into Europe. They can actually ban your entry into Europe for calling what's happening in Gaza a massacre. These student protests are going to rise, and they will rise in the face of more and more authoritarianism from the US government, police force, and the faculties, which are showing themselves to be on the wrong side of history. There is never anything wrong with being on the right side of history.